thank you everyone, and for coming to 30 Minutes with Scott Suchman. We have a presentation set, but before we begin, I'd like to go over just some information about APA and some events that we have coming up. So, if you don't know, APA is a nonprofit trade organization dedicated to supporting photographers. We provide business tools and resources to help photographers work smarter, more creatively, and more profitably. In addition to offering a strong sense of community, APA advocates on behalf of its members and serves as a hub for networking with peers across the industry. So if you're interested in joining, you'll find a link at the end of this presentation and as well as a discount. So just be on the lookout for that. Some upcoming events and announcements. So you'll see that we have most of our social hours already planned ahead of time, but we do have some programming events that will be happening throughout the year. And you'll see that in the website as well as Instagram. So just keep an eye out for that. One thing to note is we do have a virtual happy hour tomorrow from 6 to 8. And this is to celebrate our grant recipient, Omar Soto. So if you can, we'd like you to tune in. This will be a virtual happy hour. So if you have time, we'd like most participants to come in and learn more about his projects. We also have a happy hour at Arlington, and it's in Bronson Beer Hall. That will happen later on in September from 6 to 8 as well, and all ages are welcome to come. We have an open event also, our coffee hours at the Kogard Courtyard. That's typically on Saturdays from 12 to 2. And a virtual happy hour hosted by Sam, who's here today, on November 18th. As well as if you're a photographer and you're looking to build up your crew, we have an assistants and crew list. So if you're looking for digitechs, location scouts, producers, MUAs, this is a good resource to find the crew that you're looking for. Or if you're also an assistant digitech scout producer, you can send us information and we can have you uploaded into our system. Just note that APA members do have priority on that list. So if you haven't already, you can go to apadc.com and then look into that. We also have APA Circle, which I like to refer. It's kind of just an online forum where you can meet other photographers across the industry nationwide. It's a good resource to find other information that photographers have come across. There's some peer reviews or peer-to-peer reviews, as well as information on like finding where you can get inspiration from. So it's an overall good resource and benefit that APA members get. Talking about memberships and discounts, these are some of the discounts that we receive and benefits. It can be found also on APA Circle, and it has outlined what the discounts are, and for how long. So just take a look at that. And finally, the last deck, which is if you're interested in becoming an APA member, you get $20 off membership just using the code DC1 for 20. Excellent. So let me now stop sharing. And we will move into our conversation, or excuse me. So I'd like to introduce our guest, Scott Suchman. Scott is originally from New Jersey, and he's made DC his home, where he photographs for national publications, including Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Washingtonian, and the New York Times, among many others. His signature style is vibrant, high contrast, and unapologetically bold, which makes his work instantly recognizable. I'm thrilled to have Scott with us today to sort of share his journey as a photographer and how he's become not only a leading voice in DC, but also a respected name across the nation. So Scott, feel free to share your slide.
Well, just real quick, Dylan, thank you for that amazing introduction. I want a copy of that. I want to send it to all my family members. And Katie, I want to thank you, I think, who originally reached out to me for doing this. I really, really appreciate that. Sam, I want to thank you for making me join APA. And Mike, I want to thank you for just being a really good friend for too many years than I care to mention, and for also all the great work you've done for APA. So really, really happy here. And thank all of you for showing up today and taking a little time out of your weekday to show up. So really quick, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just show um, hold on here, a couple things. Everyone see this okay? It's a big
Yes.
picture of some uh, falafel. So, real quick, I'm just going to share a somewhat recent project. I thought instead of just showing a whole body of work, I just would share a recent project, which is some work for the work for the Washington Post. I do a lot of work for them, photographing restaurants and stuff for the food section. And this was all these images were shot specifically for their spring dining guide, which came out last, I guess it was May. So I just thought I'm just going to sort of click through these and then I really, and Dylan and I are hoping that this will be more of a conversation in the sense that he and I will talk about questions that he has and then questions that people have sent in and just kind of talk about curiosity about what I do or food photography in the district or restaurants in the district or anything like that. So real quick, I've been covering food in DC pretty much over 20 years. But it started mostly in '08, starting work for the Washingtonian and also Washington Post. As you know, the landscape for editorial photography has completely changed, sadly, in our world. So a lot of the work I do now is a little more commercial for restaurants directly, PR firms working with restaurants or brands, that sort of thing. But my love has always been editorial, and so that's kind of what I wanted to show some of the editorial work. So, whoops, hold on, sorry, give me a second. Whoop. Ah, here we go. So this is some stuff I said for the dining guide, for the post. Not only do I shoot food, but I also shoot people and portraits and architecture and environments. And I always tell people that food photography is not the right title for what a lot of us do. Because yes, we do shoot the food, but we also are architectural photographers, we're portrait photographers, as well as being sort of product photographers and documentary photographers. So it's very multidisciplinary. My photography started out 30 some odd years ago in the newspaper world, which there are a lot of photographers of my generation that sort of can understand that we sort of start out working for local newspapers where you are a bit of a Swiss Army knife, where you learn how to shoot everything. I mean, I used to shoot sports I mean, that seems so alien to me, but I used to do that. And then as you get older in your career, you sort of start to specialize. I think now younger photographers can specialize a lot sooner. I think the world has changed a little bit in terms of that. But that's sort of how I got my start. And like I said, portraits, spaces. I really enjoy this. I like food people. I like food, but I love chefs. I love bartenders. I love restaurateurs and owners. And I'm fascinated always by this sort of back of house stuff and things in the kitchens and the personalities of chefs. And I've gotten to know so many of them over the years. I call many of them friends, and I've really enjoyed sort of watching this community grow over the years. So I'm just going to sort of go through
Yeah.
here. And the trick with restaurant photography is always like it can't always just be a plate on a table. You're always trying to find new ways to photograph the same thing over and over and over again. So that's sort of the challenge that I always appreciate. Um,
Scott, question for you
sure.
actually about that. Do you get to decide kind of, or how involved are you in the propping decisions and or the styling when you're on these
Well, for the
assignments?
the restaurant stuff, like the editorial restaurant stuff, not at all. Because you're coming into a restaurant and this is the plate that they use. I'm like, oh, I'm a little tired of white plates, but that's what the restaurant uses. And this is how this particular chef will plate the vol au vent, which is what that is. And it's my job to just sort of take, like, this would be a good example of me, like, okay, here's the plate of this fish. I think it's trout that comes out of the kitchen. It's a lovely dish, but what can I do to not photograph this plate? Just go back real quick. Just like on a table. Okay, how can I make it different from that? So it's sort of he gives me the plate, and then I'll just sort of run around the restaurant and just sort of see what I can find. And this was the waiter station that had all these plates stacked up, and I'm like, I'm just gonna throw this plate on top of that. And there's some glassware in the background, and so I'm making those decisions on a restaurant shoot. But the decisions in terms of like props and the types of food, other shoots, more like cookbook shoots, which like Katie and I has worked with, where there's a team that's really involved in that. And I have input, but I'm one member of a larger team. um, I'll have a little more input there. But when shooting the restaurants, it's really, you know, what's coming out of the kitchen, and I'm just reacting to that, which is why I say a lot. My sort of photojournalist training from many, many years ago I've done well by that as a restaurant photographer because I'm just reacting to things. And as a photojournalist, you react to things. You know, this is what you've been given. Now make a picture out of it, you know. So but
I
I
see.
love, you know, just the scenes, restaurant scenes and experience is I've just loved that. And working with chefs, this is Brian Voltaggio, a lot of people know him. He's like a top chef, and they're great and interesting people to work with. And I really love, again, going back to the idea of like, it's also architectural photography. It's not just shooting a burger. It's multidisciplinary. Um, and then uh, just sort of going through some of the stuff here. Just sort of my personal style is really poppy and bright and really saturated colors and deep shadows. I tend to light everything now. Years ago, I didn't. I was very much a natural light guy and like F2, you know, lens wide open. And that was of an era. And that's kind of not what I do now. And now I've sort of developed a style like many other photographers. This isn't just me, this is photography in general. We all follow trends and are influenced by things. And I think now this is kind of the look that people like, and I like it, and I just sort of put my own personal spin on it as best I can. Um, and I shoot very little natural light anymore, depending on the client, but I really don't do too much of that. So,
Yeah.
okay, so that's just let me just stop my share so we can sort of get back to. So that's just an overview of kind of what I do. Oh, did I not stop it?
Yeah,
Hold
you
on.
did. You
I did.
did.
Okay, great.
And going back to your style, is that something that I assume you've evolved over time, or did you find some sort of sense and creativity to sort of define that, or was it just through experimentation?
I think, you know, we're all photographers here, you know, on this group today. I think we all can speak to sort of influences and sort of, oh, I got this new piece of gear. I'm going to see what I can do with that, or seeing some photograph somewhere. um, this is prior to social media, of course. So you're seeing photography differently. You're seeing it in print, you're seeing it in books, you're seeing it in museums, and sort of seeing artists that are like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if I could do my own spin on that. And I think about 10 years ago, when I first got into shooting food photography, everything was natural light. Everything was like tilt shift lenses. I don't, if I'm getting in the weeds with technical stuff, I apologize. But most of us here, I think, speak the same language. So yeah, when I started really getting into it in the early 2000s, this was film just going into digital as well, which was great. But you were using tilt shift lenses and you were blowing out the background. And the idea was you'd shoot this steak and like just a tiny portion of it would be in focus and everything would kind of blow out. And now if I look at those images, like an old cookbook from them or an old magazine article that I shot, I'm like, oh God, this is just, what is this? But isn't that fashion and art? I mean, it's like looking at clothing from the 50s or 60s, but then we embrace it again. We bring, you know, slim pants from the 60s back for men and you know, whatever. So, but yeah, around 10 years ago, this sort of bringing in the hot light and really poppy exposures became a thing in food photography. I probably Bon Appetit magazine probably was the people probably pushing that. I would say that was where I kind of really saw it and was like really inspired by that and sort of like, oh,
Okay.
how can I do my version of this? And then sort of playing with gear and just getting rid of all those, you know, that the style from before. And now I really enjoy it. And it's even the work I do now is not the same as the work I did 5 years ago with light because technology is changing, I'm changing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I did have a question or a question from Rebecca, which is
Oh.
about gear.
Mhm.
Oh, just lost it. So shooting editorial, how do you approach bringing gear on these restaurant shoots? I find that there isn't often a budget for equipment and spaces are very tight. We have to move fast. What's your go-to approach? The lighting The lighting in these is so gorgeous.
Oh, that's very kind, Rebecca. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. And I love your glasses. Um, so always looking for cool glasses. One of these days, I'll actually buy a pair of cool glasses. But anyway, um, so I'm a minimalist. I mean, even though I use lighting, I'm still a real minimalist, and I don't travel with a lot of gear. I rarely work with assistants for the editorial stuff because the budgets are just not there. She's yes, the budgets just aren't there. So it's just me, and I carry basically three bags. One bag is tripod and light stands and modifiers if I use them, the camera gear, and then lights. I use Profoto lights. The B10X plus super duper, whatever it is. I have the 500-watt second ones and the 250s. I'm using the 250s more now for the location stuff. I don't need the power of the 500s. Those are more for studio stuff. Um, but that's it. And a lot of the stuff I shoot with one light and a reflector, or I'll do one light and a reflector and then another light bounce to just fill in to open the shadows up. Sometimes that's bounced off the ceiling. Sometimes it's into an umbrella behind me or through a modifier of some kind. But that's it. That's the most I'll do. If I'm shooting natural light, which I still do on occasion, I do have flags and stuff that I'll bring in and just block out all that crazy tungsten lighting if I can't turn lights off. But I try to shoot minimally because I'm also using lights. I don't use the tripod as much as I used to because I can just work quicker that way. Like, okay, now I'll shoot a low angle. Now I'll hop up on a step stool. I'll do a high angle. Tripod just slows you down. And this is for editorial stuff. I mean, in studio is a whole other world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so do you mind talking about that, the difference between like
sure.
editorial and then maybe doing
Right.
like cookbook?
Right. Well, cookbook, and I can thank Katie here. Katie and I worked on a couple of cookbooks, and she's fantastic and a great editor and a great ally and someone who really understands, who's a great translator between the needs of a photographer and the needs of a creative team, you know. But anyway, yeah, cookbooks are typically ones I've done have always, either in a studio type environment. Sometimes they've been in homes, but we're sort of treating the home as a studio. And that's bringing in, bigger lights, bigger modifiers. A lot of times I'll shoot through like a frost, or sometimes I'll just use a large octabank type things, or soft lighters. And then you've got a digital tech. So you've got the big monitors. It's just like shooting an editorial portrait or a fashion shoot in a studio. It's the same difference as you've got a lot of people standing around. I mean, I think as a photographer on those cookbook shoots, and you've got a food stylist and most likely a prop stylist and assistants and photo editors and art directors. So there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen, to use that metaphor. And the photographer is just a part of it. I find I come in, I set up my lights, I work with my assistant, we get everything set, you know, we take those first shots, and then I just kind of like walk away and just sort of let everyone gather around the monitors and everyone sort of make their choices, decisions, and then I swoop back in and make some adjustments, and then I walk away again. It's very different. Whereas if it's just me doing an editorial shoot, I'm all of it. I'm the prop stylist and the food stylist and the whatever. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so when you started doing food, it sounded like it took some while before you got to that approach of like, I'm going to be
Right.
doing food photography. Um, were you knowledgeable about the industry at all, or how did you come about
The food photography
getting it,
industry, or which industry?
the food?
Um, So I started doing the food more in the very early 2000s. Before then, like a lot of photographers, you're like a Swiss Army knife. I was doing portraits. I was like everyone in their 20s. I was doing like conventions and trade shows and all those, and then newspapers and small magazines and all that. And then I started doing these travel stories for regional publications and stuff for Southern Living. And part of those travel stories was always a food element, whether it was like this restaurant, this cafe, this farmer, this vineyard, whatever. So I just was shooting those as part of bigger stories. And I just really just found those people very interesting and learned about their industry while I was shooting it, like how chefs work and what that world, what's it like being in a restaurant. And we all kind of speak the same language because they're creative individuals as well. Chefs, especially, chefs and bartenders, especially. I mean, they are visual people. They are. They have a creative vision, and if you can connect with that and they can connect, then you can really work well together. So that's kind of how I learned about the industry. And then learning about like cookbooks and all that, that just sort of evolves over time, you know. Yeah.
Gotcha. And here's a question from Blake. How do you manage your posture to existing and potential clients? Sure, a photographer wants exposure in the Washington Post, but you're kind of a big deal. How do you project that? How do you set aside humility and cultivate the understanding that these publications want you as much as you want them?
I've never set aside humility. No, I'm kidding. I think that's an interesting question. I think we all struggle as artists. We all struggle with maintaining ego, and I mean maintaining ego not in an arrogant way, but as a protective shell. I mean, your ego is your shell to protect you, and we constantly face rejection. All of us here, every single one of us here, Annie Leibovitz face rejection. Everyone faces rejection. Every artist does. And I think that's part of the artist's way, isn't it? You know, is sort of taking it and then getting on to moving on to the next thing. And sadly, we'll talk about editorial. The editorial markets are really changing, and that pie is getting so much smaller. And there are so many more photographers that want a piece of that pie because for a lot of photographers, I wouldn't say all of them, for a lot of photographers, I think especially I'm 57, so aging Gen X photographer, print was always the ultimate thing for so many of us. You know, it was like getting in whatever your fantasy was, whether it's Bon Appetit or Nat Geo or Time or Newsweek or Sports Illustrated, you know, and all these publications. Some of them don't exist anymore that I've just said, or they're just getting smaller and smaller, and the budgets are smaller and smaller. And I mean, there are photographers who I worshiped when I was younger who are still working and doing jobs for budgets that are like unbelievably low because they just want to do that work. We love the freedom of editorial, and we love seeing that physical thing in print. You know, we just love seeing that. So we keep doing it. And I don't think I've answered your question at all, Blake, and I apologize. I don't know what I'm talking about now, but I think it's the there is you never get rid of the humility because you're humbled constantly about the rejection of like, oh, I want to shoot for these people. And I meet with editors in New York. I do all sorts of things, and it's just, you cast your bread upon the waters, right? And you just hope that people will want to work with you. And may I be philosophical for one quick second?
Yeah.
There is an amazing line in a movie. There's a Meryl Streep movie that came out during COVID called Florence Foster Jenkins about a woman who was an opera singer in New York in the 40s who was a horrible opera singer. But she didn't realize that. And her partner was played by Hugh Grant, who's sort of a failed British Shakespearean actor who ends up just managing her career, and that's his life. And there's a line in this movie where Hugh Grant, as this sort of failed Shakespearean actor, is talking to a concert pianist who wants to be a famous concert pianist who's very young. And he says to him, accept that you are good and not great, and that will free you from the tyranny of ambition, and then you will start to live. I'm not a tattoo guy, but if I did, I would put that on my arm. I think as an older creative individual, you accept that you are good and not great. That's everything. It's probably hard to accept that when you're 27, but when you're 57, you're like, yeah, it's okay. I've had a very good career and I'll continue to have a decent career. Maybe I didn't get to those pinnacles that I wanted at 27, but I've also done some amazing things. So I think that's super important. So that talks to your thing about the humility, and that's just like just trying to
Yeah,
make it through every day, you know?
I
Yeah.
understand. I
Like I hope
know
that helped.
Um, I know that, starting out, I often would hear this where it's like try to get an editorial job, like one of the Washington Post, maybe Washington Magazine, and from there you can move on to bigger commercial jobs. In your experience, do you think what you've seen is that still the case that doing, getting that work and then promoting that to more lucrative clients or more like commercial ad clients. Is that still the case, or do you see there being other avenues?
Right. It's not the case anymore. It was definitely my case. I mean, there
Okay.
was a time where almost all my income was derived from editorial photography years ago. Now it's the exact opposite. I mean, a very small part of my income is from editorial, but I just do it because I love it. But most of the income I get is for restaurant groups, products, things like that. I mean, cookbooks I would still consider editorial because it is, it's a printed thing, but not considered advertising or commercial. Most of my work is that commercial, and the way I got there was through shooting all this editorial work and then showing that. Now I think it's there's just not enough editorial work to go around, and there will continue to be less and less. So I think in food photography specifically anywhere in America, if that's where you want to go, the way you make a living is shooting for restaurants, and you shoot for the small mom and pop Thai restaurant down the street, and then create good work, and then show that to other restaurants, and then maybe you get, Pizza Hut calls you or Burger King or something like that. You sort of build up that way. But that's how you do it now. I think it's always go for as many clients as you want, whether they're editorial, whatever. But I think in food photography specifically, I don't think that's the path anymore. I
I
don't think
see.
for any photography that's the path anymore. I don't know. I don't know what the path is. It's all changed. I mean, COVID really changed so much, and social media changed so much, and just the death of print. I don't know. I get emails or DMs from younger photographers who are very kind and like, oh, I love your work. Like, tell me, I'd love to meet for coffee. I always say yes. If someone reaches out to me and said they want to meet for coffee, always I will meet for coffee. If I, schedule wise, it may take a while, but I will meet with them or at least a phone call. Um, and they say, like, tell me about your path. And I'm like, my path is no longer valid. My path I can't tell you anything. You know more than I do now about how this works because you're 24 and you're really attuned into TikTok and social media, Instagram and whatever other things that are out there that I don't even know about. So, and you're using the technology, Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever you're using better than I ever could. So, tell me your path. I'd love to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I'll definitely take you up on the coffee offer
Yeah.
too.
Oh, absolutely, Dylan. Of
Uh,
course.
but Sam did have a follow-up on commercial versus editorial and asking how much do you allocate your time spent between those two, or do you find that there's kind of like an imbalance?
Definitely more much and by commercial, commercial is just sort of it's one of those catch-all words.
Hmm.
Like I never thought 5 years ago that I would do jobs for clients that the sole place that those images exist is on Instagram. That's like that blows my mind. That the idea and they're paying very respectable rates, that I would consider excuse me, I consider respectable rates more than editorial for images that are just going to exist on Instagram. It's wild to me, but that's the face of the industry. The food and restaurant industry has changed so much. So the good majority of my work is that type of commercial work, but I don't market myself to commercial clients at all. I don't, the only marketing I do is to editorial clients because it's the most competitive. It's the work I want the most. Um, and you have to constantly remind these people that you exist, whether it's the New York Times or whether it's the big magazines, Food and Wine, whatever. And I've done work for all these people, but like you don't get a Bon Appetit shoot every couple months. You get that every couple years, especially when you live in DC, or Food and Wine or whatever, you know. Um, it's just because you got it one time doesn't mean you're going to get it again. You know, I mean, I like working for the New York Times, but it's like every 2 months I get a shoot for them if they have something that's down here, or something like that. The Post, their budgets, as you know, are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Washingtonian, all these places. So commercial is pretty much what keeps me afloat, and I like doing it. I don't like dislike the work. I love the people. It's still me shooting food in restaurants or food in the studio and applying all my principles. It's just sort of where the work ends up is just sort of different. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you're mentioning marketing that you do market mostly for editorial. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Do you have personal projects that you market, or is it strictly
Sure.
work?
Marketing wise, the like MailChimp emailers, the email things, which is a big thing. I've done one in a little bit. I need to do that. I have worked with marketing people in the past who are wonderful and amazing. And the ones I've worked with, I highly recommend. Stacey Zrodowski I've worked with, who's fantastic. Um, what was I going to say? So yeah, and updating the website, and then LinkedIn, which I'm not a particular fan of LinkedIn, but everyone says you need to put stuff on LinkedIn. I just this the UX UI of LinkedIn is so awful. I just can't. I just hate being on that thing. But I guess that's a thing, right? Editors are working at that, creative directors are looking at that. So I do a little bit on that. Um, Instagram. I think actually the biggest marketing I do is Instagram. And I think for the work that I do, which most of it is local and most of it is for local restaurants and food brands, Instagram is where they all are. It's where all the food PR people are looking or work. So that to me is the best fishing hole right there is Instagram. If you're gonna dip your rod into anything, for me personally, it's Instagram. Um, and then I have a list of like editors, that I know all over the country of various places, and I'll just personally send them something maybe once a quarter, maybe twice a year. I don't, you don't want to inundate people with emails because then, especially editorial editors, they're just like enough. It's like they're getting these every day. Hey, just checking in, any shoots in the DC area. Like sometimes that works, sometimes they're just annoyed by it. So it's a fine line. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
I
gonna go
can't
ahead
say
and
what's best for me. I don't really know. And I've done the photo works in New York, the portfolio reviews. I do enjoy those. I don't know if I've gotten that much bang for my buck, but I've definitely broken through to some editors and stuff that I would not have been able to break through prior. So I do find those helpful, but they are pricey.
pricey,
Um,
certainly.
yeah, but it does motivate you to get your act together. If you know you've got this, you're going to be meeting 20 editors in 2 days in a couple of months, you're like, I got to update the website. I got to get a leave behind promo. I've got to, if you do a print book, which I do, I got to make sure my print book is up and ready to go. So things like that. So that's a good motivation factor is going to those reviews. Yeah.
Okay.
And you guys do them
Um,
down here. So I am, whenever you do them, I'm never available. So Dylan, we're going to get our calendars together next time so that so I know that I'm in town when you have one of those.
we'll be sure to send you
So
a message
thank you.
directly.
Please
Yeah.
make me a priority, Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bono, as
we'll
you would say
consult
last
your
time.
calendar.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and share some of your work as you're,
Okay. Oh, great.
answering these questions.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
But I did want to ask, what is your dream assignment? What is your dream project?
Oh, I gave up on my dream so long ago, Dylan. No, I actually just had one, which was actually pretty cool.
Okay.
And I can't give too many details about it because, as you probably know, with print, like print is, we call it's like embargoed. So you can't really show images until stories run. But I can say it was for the Washington Post. But I was able to travel to 5 different cities across the country and photograph 5 different restaurants that have all sort of a certain significance. Um, and that was really fun because I love shooting at restaurants, but it's just so fun to go to another city, see what that food scene is like. And the people are great. The people are the same. Restaurant folks are the same wherever you go. And they're open and interested. And if you know a little bit about their industry and you understand how restaurants work, they're like, come on in, do what you need to do, go wherever you want, go into the kitchen, go into wherever. And that really was like a really great assignment that just made me so happy. And I really appreciate the editors that were willing to get a budget together. Because, like I say, editorial budgets for traveling are just so slim now. So I'm really appreciative to those editors who were able to make that work. And that was a lot of fun. And that just wrapped up. There might be one more restaurant that I might be shooting, which will be more local, but I just did that, wrapped those up a few weeks ago, but that was a lot of fun. Beyond that, I'm just happy to keep working. I mean, um, it's just like being busy. I just like people wanting to hire me and appreciating my work. The best compliment you get for a job is a second job. I
Yeah.
don't need to have an editor or a PR person, creative director say, "Oh, Scott, we love the shots." That's great. I'm glad you love the shots. What I want to hear is, Scott, hey, are you available to do this other thing for us? That is to me the best compliment you can get in our industry. I always say it's easy to get a first date. It's difficult to get a second date. So that's the trick, is just doing such a great job on your first date that the second date's just bound to happen, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you
And
don't get that second date, then you gotta think about it. Why? And it may not be your fault, may not be the work, it may be a million other reasons, but it's always good to do that sort of postmortem on why you didn't get the second date or the second job, to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I phoned it in that day, or I did this, or I did that, or oh, they've got budget problems and my rates are too high, or whatever, whatever. But that's important part of the business, I think. Yeah.
yeah, certainly. Definitely something to think about. But Sam did have a follow-up question. He had asked about he'd seen a Jordan story for an airline
Oh,
magazine,
right. Yeah.
and he was asking how does the project work where it's editorial but with more logistics as far as travel.
So
That's
I
it.
used to do, back again at the heyday of magazines, I used to do a lot of work for airline magazines. I shot for Delta Sky, the American Way, which is American Airlines, Hemispheres, which was the United, which is where that story was. That was in one of the last issues of that magazine. They're all gone now. All those airline magazines are gone. There's those three that I mentioned. There are a few airline here's some travel stuff. And I do travel work. I don't do as much as I used to. The budgets aren't there. And I'm an okay travel photographer. I am good, not great. And there are great travel photographers out there who are working, who just are getting the gigs because they deserve the gigs and they're really wonderful. But that particular story, which you're seeing some images there now from Jordan, that was with Hemispheres. And that was actually done with the writer. Typically, I don't do stories like that with the writer. I go after the fact. The writer's already gone. They give me all the information. I reach out to the various people and places. I've done stories in Barbados, in uh, Puerto Rico, other parts of the US, where they've done all the homework and I just go in and make the connections and go with a shot list and go shoot. The Jordan one, I went with the writer, I think because of the expense of sending a writer and then sending a photographer two different times. It just made sense to do them at the same time. So to be honest, the writer kind of handled everything. And I was just like, I was the passenger princess. And I just kind of went along and they're like, here's the camels and here's the camp and here's the food market and here's this restaurant. So logistics for that were all taken care of. And because it's for United Airlines, they handle the flights and all that kind of stuff. So you really don't have to handle and the hotels and everything. You don't have to handle too much. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Um, Another question I had, which is more food related, but how do
Mhm.
you sort of fight against the visual cliches in food photography? Do you find inspiration elsewhere? How do you stay on
Well,
top of?
I think it's a great question for every photographer here, no matter what you shoot. You do portraits, you do, landscapes, you do architecture. I mean, our life, we are the creators of the cliches. We are the dreamers of the dreams, right? So the trick is not avoiding the cliches. The trick is to, oh, actually this story really quick. This won a American Photography Award. This was a great story for another magazine that is no longer, which was DC, was Frey, if you remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah. And this is a story on a salmon, on a smoke fishing place, Ivy City here in DC.
yeah,
Um, but cliches, I- you know, it's not about avoiding the cliches. It's about creating a well executed cliche. Because in my business, it's like, okay, we're shooting pizza. Okay, there's pretty much one way to shoot pizza. One camera angle for pizza works. You have to be above the pizza, shooting down on a pizza. There's this big clock. There's this big Pac-Man. There's this triangle slice. How do you make it different? You just draw on everything you've ever done and just try to screw around and try to make it different. But yeah, our business is rife with cliches, and I think it's just taking those cliches and embracing them. It's not so much throwing them out because they're just always going to be there, you know? So a burger is a burger, right? There's just so many
yeah,
ways to shoot a burger. I mean, I think in my business, the cliche is like the angle. Like, oh, here's another straight on shot of a burger. Well, that's kind of how you have to shoot a burger, right? I just did a cover for Washingtonian, which is another burger shot straight on, but you work with a great food stylist, you work with a great art director, and you're like, let's figure out together how to make this burger super sexy and interesting and whatever. The way you light it, the way you post process it, the way you style it, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha. I did have a question about this assignment, the Ivy City Smokehouse.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of, I can see that there's very clear, uh, like colors that are looked after. Obviously, that orange salmon, kind of
Right.
that steel.
Right.
And this in particular, I've noticed that like the complementary orange on this cable
Right.
with the salmon, is that intentional in the
A
moment of
hundred
shooting?
percent
Okay.
intentional. Absolutely. I mean, the color of this story, I love when I can shoot things that have it's not monochromatic, but are minimally chromatic. When I can shoot something that has like even just go up for 1 second. Sorry, just
Yeah,
go
sure.
back up to the woman throwing the salmon around. Just scroll up.
Uh, is it
Right there. Stop right there. Right.
okay?
No, no, lower. Go down. Go down.
Where
Stop
the
there. Right there.
where the
Okay. So really quick. So the shot on the left of the woman in the mask throwing the salmon around, the hands on the that's actually the stuff. It's like that's the stuff they use to burn. It's a fuel that they use for smoking. Um,
Mhm.
and then the salmon shot, the salmon just in the tank there. Um, I love shots like that where basically there's three, four colors at most in a picture. And it really just draws your eyes to certain things. This story was obviously all about the salmon orange. So anywhere that I saw that color or I could highlight that color, I really loved it. And then it also plays against the stuff like the salmon in the gray tank, where it's just salmon or fish in general. They're gray, they're silvery, they're white, and all the elements around this are also the same color. It's basically like a black and white photo. It's basically monochromatic. And then the hands holding this fuel that they burn. The same thing. There's three colors there. So I love any opportunity where I can play that up. And that's the kind of thing when you've been shooting a long time and you have developed a visual language, your eye sees it instantly and you latch onto it. And you may not even realize that until you're home editing your photos. That like, oh, you've latched onto that kind of thing. So I do love that when I can be in an environment where I can minimize the color palette, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I have I also love it when it's just a riot of color too, which is all like shooting in markets and stuff where there's just so much color and different colors and different textures. I like that too. So I like it
And
all.
in terms of your like post production, is it different for different medias, I suppose? And how much do you have influence over that in terms of the editing style? Like whether it's
Um,
magazine, newspaper,
oh, I mean, it depends. Like
digital.
cookbooks, like if you're doing a cookbook, they're bringing you in. There's a lot of creative conversations. There's a lot of like inspo decks, and there's a lot of like that kind of stuff. And they're like, this is how we kind of want stuff lit. So I've done cookbooks that you would look at them and you go, oh, I guess Scott shot that. It might have a more natural light look to it or something. And that's what the client wants. And we're in this. This is another one. Again, this sort of I love shooting in factory environments too, food processing plants. Another one where you're sort of minimizing the colors and stuff. But uh for most of my work, it's all processed kind of the same because that's what people hire me. They want stuff to look like something that Scott Suchman would shoot. So it's like high key, contrasty, really saturated. Um, Cookbooks, you have to be a little careful because of the printing process and the way that works. So the cookbooks that I've shot, I've sort of had to rein that back in a little bit. But I do have a cookbook coming out next year, a pizza cookbook that was a little more poppy and contrasty and that sort of thing. So it depends. Yeah, it varies.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you working on any personal projects or what are your opinions of personal projects?
Oh, huge fan. I've always have something going on that inspires me personally. And it's actually go to cookbooks. Go
Cookbooks,
to
sure.
cookbook and just go to the Power Five right there.
Will do.
So I just wanted to, this is not related to your question, but this
Yeah.
is stuff, just as an example. This is so Katie Dance, who I think is not with us right, oh, she's off the call, but she worked on this as a photo editor. This is stuff that is a team: food stylist, prop stylist, art director, photo director, creative director, editorial director, photo assistant. Everyone is on the set for this. And it is, I'm deciding the lighting and that sort of stuff and camera angle, but everything is done by committee. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because I don't necessarily have, like, this would not have been my vision to do stuff with these things, the stacks, but it's how cool is it, So it's
Mhm.
my job to work with the food stylist, like, okay, how are we going to stack these vegetables? How are we going to stack the salmon? So we build a set together that makes that work and stuff. But these are definitely images that where there's a lot of input from a lot of other people. Um, and it's not exactly the way I shoot stuff now, but it bears my fingerprint, I think, a little bit in the lighting and the styling and that sort of thing. Um, but back to personal projects. If you go there, I do have some personal projects on here. I think that's really important to do personal projects. It keeps your sanity. And even if those projects never, if you go to projects, go to Navajo Rodeo, actually, click on that. This is completely off base for work that I do. This was just a fun thing for me. I have one of these images that the horse right there on the upper left with all the sand being kicked up that ran in United Airlines for a story. Um, but no, these photos have really never seen the light of day beyond my website, and that's fine. I just enjoy doing this. It was rodeos in the Navajo Nation. So these are all American Indians Native Americans who partake in rodeo, which I thought when I first came upon this seemed like the biggest contradiction to me for someone of my generation, especially who grew up on like John Wayne movies and that kind of stuff. It just seemed wild that this community really embraced cowboy culture and rodeo. And I went back a couple of times over 5 or 6 years to just photograph these rodeos and met some awesome people. And it was just fun. I just did it for me, just to just open my eyes to other things. And this is while I would come home and I would just shoot food in restaurants and whatever, and then I would go out there and just kind of shoot this stuff and just for fun, you know.
Yeah,
So I think that's just super, super important um, to just sort of. And as you can see, it's all natural light. None of this is lit. It's just like this is it. A lot of it, most of it's shot with a rangefinder camera. Uh,
gotcha.
yeah. So
Uh,
I'm a big advocate for personal stuff. I am working on some things now that is more closely tied to food photography as a personal project that I do actually want to try to turn into something bigger, but I'm still working on that right now. Yeah.
question from Rob. Hey
Yeah.
Scott,
Hey,
huge
Rob.
fan.
Thank you.
Question,
Same here.
you licensing much? A lot of stock?
Uh, a little bit to travel mag, because a lot of the travel mags don't, uh, like I said earlier, they're not setting photographers places. So I would say every other week I get a request from some travel magazine for stock. It's always DC related, there's some portrait stuff, which is a mixture of food people in the food community as well as just other people I've done portraits for various. I shoot for a fair amount of like the money magazines like Barron's and stuff like that, where I'll do portraits, sometimes New York Times, whatever. And they're not necessarily food related people, but I'll get requests maybe every other week from various newsstand magazines looking for stock of this restaurant, that restaurant, this travel destination, and I'll license some stuff, but it's not huge. It's not really huge. Uh, but it's mostly like people, yeah, looking for restaurants in DC that they need for a travel story. So I'll license, but yeah, it was much bigger years ago, but again, not as much now. And also the thing is that I'll shoot for these restaurants, and then let's say Travel and Leisure is doing a story on or New York Times is a good example. New York Times just ran a story of like 25 favorite restaurants in DC or best restaurants in DC. And they reach out to the restaurants, and then the restaurants send them the photos that me and a lot of other food photographers in the city have taken for them, and we can't license them because it becomes handout art. So a lot of what food photographers in this city, and I'm sure other cities do, is you're creating libraries for these restaurants, and then that becomes handout art for New York Times, Washingtonian, Travel and Leisure, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine. So sometimes I'll literally open up a Travel and Leisure magazine, which I subscribe to, and I'll be like, oh, that's my photo. but you've been paid once to do it, and it's to be handout art for the exact purpose of giving it out free to the media. So it's just the days of usage and stuff is just they're just especially on a smaller local level, usage is dead. I think you can apply it to some Fortune 500 clients, but I think on a local level, usage is dead. Yeah.
I see. Um, I know we have a few more minutes. I do want to ask this question
Mhm.
before the end, but what are some challenges that would surprise our guests here today to learn about your work or the industry in which you work in food photography
Two,
industry?
I'd say two. One's business related, one's artistic, creative. The business one is that it does not matter how long you've been doing this, and it does not matter, especially on a local level like this. And again, it goes back to the good, not great thing, is that it's always a hustle, and every contract is reinventing the wheel every time. And as you're working with younger, the client base is younger, so the art directors, creative directors, the PR people are younger. They don't have a lot of that experience in terms of how contracts work or just aspects of the industry work. So that's always a challenge is explaining the work to people, what I do, how I do it, why it costs this much, that sort of thing. So that never ends. At 57, it's every new client is like reinventing the wheel. So it gets exhausting, but it's just part of the game. I've been able to be a freelance photographer who's made a good living for 35 years. I'm not complaining. It's just you just have to accept that that's part of it. And the constant marketing, the constant putting stuff on Instagram. It's a shark. Your career is a shark, right? Shark stops swimming and it sinks. You have to constantly keep moving forward. And then that translates to the creative challenge is that I'm always trying to figure out to find new inspiration for work within the realm of what I do and how I do it. So taking the lighting style that I have or the post-production style that I have and keep juicing it, keep playing with it, keep altering it, keep finding ways to make it more interesting. I'm a nerd. I love gear and lenses and cameras and yeah, I get a new toy and it motivates me and excites me and I'll play with that for a while and that pushes me in a new direction visually, that I like. So those are things that I think young photographers that never ends. It does not matter how old you are. You are always, I'm sure Rob could speak to this too, because Rob's been around a long time too. We and Mike Morgan. So you're constantly pushing it. You cannot rest on your laurels. There are no
Um,
laurels to rest on. Laurels are prickly plants. If you rest on them, it's not comfortable, you know? So yeah. I'm gonna trademark that. It's just
yeah,
saying.
yeah, feel
Yeah.
Let me stop sharing really quick. Well, thank you, Scott.
yeah.
One final question. Oh, wait, Sam, do you have a question? No. What's your favorite restaurant in DC?
Oh, I can't say that.
Try to get
There's
you
a
there.
lot of there's a lot of great restaurants in DC. Read and subscribe to the Washington Post and Washingtonian to find out which ones they are, but they're all good. And I live in Adams, Morgan, so I do go to a lot of restaurants in my neighborhood and keep them busy and in business. And right now, it's a really hard time for restaurant business with what's going on in the city. So go out, spend money, do what you can. I think that's important. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate you being so candid and open
Yep.
and, informing us of your journey, your work. This is a really great conversation, and thank you everyone for attending
Thank
the 30
you.
minutes.
Thank you
Uh,
so
This,
much.
this was a real pleasure, Dylan. Thank you again. And Katie is not here. Thank her. Thank you all for sticking with me and listening. And those of you who don't know me, I love talking about the business, as you can tell, and I'm always happy to grab a coffee or a cocktail or whatever. And if you see me at an APA event, come up and
Great.
say hi. But please feel free to reach out to me anytime, anytime. And Mike
Okay.
Morgan, you and I really need to get together. It's been too long. All right.
All right, everyone, that concludes this
Thanks.
session. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
All right.
Bye.
Good luck, everybody. Keep working.